You should have gotten on that plane.
Yeah, no shit. I don't want to be the person to say Squid Game should have just been left alone, but Squid Game should have just been left alone. It's almost like when the creator doesn't want to make something, but the big corporation is like, no, you have to make it. Maybe just don't listen. I think lackluster is a good way to describe this. Obviously the critics liked it, but that's about the same as Lizzo saying you look good. There's an extensive drop in quality, the new characters don't stand out, the plot tries they might, can't grab your attention like the original. And I hate to say this, but it has all the elements of a second season nobody wanted to make that we didn't need. Given there's a third season coming, these two clearly connect. It may only be 7 episodes, but given it's one big plot, it does kinda drag too. As expected, Sung Gi-hun's decision to not get on the plane leads him to spend the next 3 years devising a plan to stop the Squid Game. And while that is the only logical way to progress the story, it mainly follows a predictable route. It tries to do a few things to surprise you and sometimes succeeds, but usually you know what's gonna happen. No shocking moments, no character deaths or backstories that made me remotely sad, and unless they're saving everything for season 3, most of it is unresolved. A lot of subplots get put into motion, a lot of reused ones I might add, but none of them really go anywhere in the season, and I can't say that I care anyway. The more I think about it, the more I kept watching, the less I enjoyed it, and by the end, I didn't even care about the next season. I was initially skeptical, I didn't think it'd be this disappointing, but I guess the fact is, some things should just be left alone. This is made apparent in the first 2 episodes, that for the most part just had me being bored. If you remember, season 1 had this great setup, when the first episode introduced the main character, gave you a taste of what the games were like, and then the second episode, despite being kind of dull, properly developed all the other characters, and by the end, you were fully invested. I know the same can't be done here, but not much of anything relevant happens. They bring back a few of who you think would be one-off characters, such as Mr. Kim, the loan shark from season 1, but this time Byung-hun has employed him to track down the recruiter, and while I do like that contrast, it's not a very engaging episode. Him and his associate eventually get lucky and succeed, which keeps happening, and upon tailing him in an attempt to get your attention, he does something that on the outside looks interesting. He buys a bunch of bread and lottery tickets, offers them to some vagrants, but they can only have one, in which most of them choose the ticket. But the reason for this is not to recruit anybody, it's actually...
Sir, I already gave you a choice, and you went with the other option.
To be an asshole. Now I'm really confused as to why the frontman talked about fairness or anything good in the first season. Now the theme is just, everybody is trash, and there's no point to the scene. He did this for literally no reason. It should be a sign it's not going to be a very good season when we have stuff like this. A big setup to have no relevancy, and the same thing can be said for what comes next. Mr. Kim and his associate get knocked out and tied up, forced to play a deadly game of rock, paper, scissors and Russian roulette. But the problem is, I don't give a shit. I guess I'm supposed to believe Mr. Kim is nicer now, as he intentionally loses letting the associate win. But even if he wasn't a loan shark, I still don't know why I care. We don't know these two. In the first season, nobody died until we knew them. That's why it was memorable. In this case, Kim means nothing to me. And yeah, the scene is good if you don't think about the context, but it's nothing new for this show. Making people beg for their life as you mentally torture them is not shocking with this show's standards. So the end result is, I don't give a shit. Apparently he's one of 2 liked new characters, but not by me. Upon confronting Gi-hun, he gives him his backstory of how he killed his own father upon failing the game. And this doesn't do anything for me either, as they are now going to play Russian roulette, and we know the outcome. Again, this can't be helped, but our lead is not going to die, so it's not a tense scene. And while the recruiter could have been interesting, he obviously will die, and it's only the first episode. So no matter what poetic lines they use, I don't care. The scene exists because he has a plot device in his pocket. Why he agreed to play the game without initially knowing that is a mystery to me. Is it because he's messed up and doesn't care? I guess. On a side note, and it does really feel like a side note, Jun-ho obviously survived the first season, as some fisherman captain saved him, who has a unique personality. And the reason I call him side note and the other guy associate is because they do very little in this season. I assume they will in season 3, but after episode 2, they practically do nothing. There's supposed to be some attention given to the cops doing nothing, but that's barely touched on, aside from side note quitting because reasons.
The evidence in our department is always very clear. Huh? It's all right there in the photos. No one can try to argue with us.
And going into episode 2, he tracks down Gi-hun. After a bit of confrontation, the three team up. And the rest of episode 2, up until the very end, is kind of nothing. There's a brief scene with Sun-woo's mother that I honestly forgot about. And the rest is irrelevant, as the tracker they put inside him, spoiler, doesn't work out. So all the mercenaries they hired, the shooting range he has in his home they used to practice, was all irrelevant. Again, maybe relevant in Season 3, but the episode isn't engaging. It had me wanting nothing more but to get to an actual game, but instead 2 whole episodes that don't give me a lot to talk about. Aside from the bare minimum, most of it does not bear mentioning. They eventually go to a Halloween party. That's the episode title. Real creative!
I don't see anyone in pink suits!
They've been merchandised to death, how couldn't you? And while he does get to talk to the front man, for more of the same dialogue, people are scum, that's why it's okay, it was your choice, even though it wasn't. It shouldn't be unexpected that their attempts to stop them wouldn't go well. I mean, they clearly have a lot of power. So that failed, he talks him into letting him join the games again. And that's really all there is to the first 2 episodes. I mean, technically there is another character, a North Korean defector, who wants to extract her daughter from the North, but I don't even know if she bears mentioning. I mean, she knows some kid who's dying, but we just met that kid too, so I'm not crying over that. The kid's dad enters the games needing money. He speaks hardly ever. It is a bit unexpected she ends up being a soldier, not a contestant, but her only relevancy is the organ harvesting subplot that they brought back because it was so popular the first time. They even throw in needless exposition.
Last time we had a player do the surgeries in exchange for information about the games they were going to play. This time we actually brought a doctor here ourselves.
If you didn't watch the first season, what's wrong with you? Respect the fucking audience. But she's not in favor of the organ harvesting subplot because it's wrong. That's why she came back to assist the death game, because that's not wrong. She tries to sabotage it, is told that's not going to keep happening. At least she can't beat up 2 men. Nothing else happens with her in this season, and I don't care if it does. Because while I didn't mind the subplot in Season 1, I also didn't care about it, so why would I care now? Unfortunately, these 2 episodes really drag. They drag hard. I get they can't do the same thing. The fact that most of the new characters haven't been introduced yet is okay. You want to do something different. But nothing is done to get my attention. I don't care about any of these new characters. In Season 1, the slow bits were there for a reason, but now they're more like plot devices. I hate to say that, but I don't know what else to make of these. Nothing here is relevant to this season. And the only reason I was excited for the next episode is because we'd finally get to see a damn game. Not a new game, but it's something. But first we get introduced to some new characters, like a religious person, because that makes everything better. A trans person, because there has to be one. A mother and son, they might do something interesting eventually. A pregnant woman who needs money for obvious reasons. A guy who likes her, who screwed over other people due to bad crypto advice. A charismatic sort of antagonist and his buddy, who doesn't like the crypto guy for that reason. A couple of other potentially good additions. A girl who sticks with them for some reason. The father of the kid who's dying. But like I said, they're not gonna get much development. Trans person needs surgery. Obviously that's the other character people love for automatic reasons. Not really that fascinating. Some other girl befriends the trans person because nobody else will. So, message. Gi-hun's friend from Season 1 is there too. He's a Marine, and he knows some other Marine. They're there. And if you think they're gonna get developed as they go, you're wrong. They just don't. It's the bare minimum. It's tell, don't show. I get doing something new, but it really is just nothing. They then explain the games again, just like in Season 1, but the catch this time is the voting they can do to end the game allows them to keep the money they've earned. This is probably the one and only big difference. Watching this vote take place throughout the show is kind of fun, even though you know the outcome. But again, they could still do this in the first season, they just couldn't keep the money. And while some of them are overly unlikable, like Asian Robert De Niro, they do defend themselves, saying the money they'll get isn't enough for their debt, which some of them do mean, so it doesn't really affect that much. It's a nice change, a good example of human greed, but it's not saving this. Yeah, there are some good moments, like his friend voting to stay one time. Obviously they wear patches for a reason, to cause confrontation later, but when the mother's son votes to stay later because he actually does need money to avoid being violently killed, it's a bit ridiculous when the mother still calls him selfish, but sympathizes with the trans person. I'm sorry, but being violently killed is worse than needing surgery. Get over it. Also, he still says you're playing at your own volition, and that's not true. Half of them usually still want to leave, so fuck that message. And upon him finding out his tracker is gone, we get what is sadly the show's best moment.
I'm fucked.
If you don't get it, then watch the first season. And then just stop. Also, if you don't like me using the dub version, too bad. It's what I'm using, don't complain in the comments. Anyhow, they're again playing red light, green light, and his attempts to keep the contestants alive does go well, until a bee ruins it.
Shit. I just moved, didn't I?
Okay, so as expected, no main characters are gonna die just yet, but she could have potentially been a main character. She said a few notable things, didn't suck up to the charismatic antagonist, so her dying immediately is one of the few, dare I say, shocking moments in this. Problem is, the trailer spoiled it, so ruined. I mean, who didn't watch the trailer? This leads to chaos, again. Luckily, he does have a plan that kinda works, making this game probably the most memorable, but the charismatic antagonist is high on drugs and gets people killed, which nobody ever brings up, I think, maybe I'm wrong. The episode reveals that actual snipers take them out, in interesting detail. How Gyun-hun knows this, I don't know, maybe I missed something. But after this, they repeat the same begging to pay back their debt scene, because the first season had that. During the aforementioned voting, he reveals he previously won the game, but it doesn't do any good. And even though at some point the guards do say interfering is not allowed, the mother does technically interfere, but nothing happens, so I guess they lied. So it's again all tied up, and player 1 has the final call. Yes, player 1 is in fact the front man, a similar concept to season 1, but the problem is, we know what's gonna happen here. It's the expected issue with doing something like this. Maybe you think there's a hidden twist you're not seeing, but no, it's gonna play out the way you think. He'll give a backstory that doesn't exist to defend his decision, or maybe it does, who knows. He'll soon advocate to leave the game, do things to make himself look less suspicious. But if you've seen the first season, which you have, if you know how this show works, it's not that engaging. He's only saying vote to leave because he knows they won't. The fact that he's convincing doesn't mean anything. And in the end, having a character in which you know who he is, acting like somebody he isn't, doesn't lead to a very good twist. Not that it's meant to be a twist, but his little presence is pointless. I guess because it worked in season 1, why not do it again, but with cheap writing. So if you've gotten over the disappointment of this season, please do still hit the like button, it's free. And if you're enjoying, subscribing is an option too. More importantly, sharing the video is imperative because YouTube doesn't. They don't, so if you can, it'd be highly appreciated. And also the gaming channel has content like this, but with games. Link in the description. Though we have an alliance of people I don't care about. Most of what they do I've already mentioned because it's not much. Organ harvesting subplot that goes nowhere in this season. Characters who don't get along because tension. The riveting stuff happening on the mainland. So let's just get to the next game. It doesn't happen too quickly, but it does eventually happen. It's some triathlon-like competition, kind of fun I guess. 5 contestants tied together, must take turns playing various games. I like how one team seems real confident but fails almost immediately. The fact that the charismatic guy cheers is kind of fun too. And episode 5 sees the games concluding, mostly in montage format. But our set of 5 intriguing individuals are the last to play.
Isn't that convenient?
However, it's not that suspenseful, as they all do real good. I can kinda see why, we know they're not gonna fail. But their method of tension is having the front man mess up over and over again while putting on an act. We know that's all fake, doesn't make it any more engaging. He also cheats after Gyun-hun messes up, essentially saving them, so why he wasted their time, I don't know. I don't get the point of this. Rest of the episode that clocks in around an hour and 10 minutes, nothing happens. I've been jumping around a bit, but let's just go in order for a moment. Characters who do nothing in the season say things that don't matter. They vote again, various people changing sides. Obviously they have to keep playing. Side note, and his team head out. They find the island with that captain guy, because apparently they can some reason. And a lot of reused ideas from season 1. They barricade themselves in, even though the contestants have no way of knowing they're allowed to kill each other. Talk about the strike again. Even they're not allowed to use the bathroom bit, because that had to be repeated. Last time it was for a plot-relevant reason. This time it's to establish being pregnant while in a death game is a bad thing. All that done, time for the next game. which mainly takes place in the next episode. So what we just discussed was almost an hour, and this time we must wait for the wheel to stop spinning, form teams of the required number, and get into a room. Again, a good idea, but not executed that good. Couple of moments that are supposed to be sad or mean something, but they don't. The son gets pulled away from her mom by force and is supposed to feel bad, I guess, even though he didn't do it deliberately. At some point, the front man kills somebody, but we know he's the front man, and it never gets brought up again, so why do we care? The girl who picked the trans person earlier dies. It's the first quote-unquote main character death, so that's something. I don't know if this is supposed to be a betrayal-themed episode, given this game would naturally cause that, but compared to the masterful Season 1 Gambu episode, something I have no issue calling one of the best episodes in TV history, this is mediocre. The betrayals mean nothing, they don't go anywhere. The dead girl we barely knew, she wasn't developed in the slightest. And honestly, seeing Ace Frehley play at the Token Lounge is a lot sadder. And I don't really like Ace Frehley, so that's saying something. Overall, it's just sad seeing how low this show's become. One thing I do like is how they initially blamed the crypto guy because he seemingly took her spot, but it's clear she wouldn't have made it anyway, meaning he essentially saved them, and they accept that. If they didn't, it'd be forced writing, which I can't stand, but it's still not very good.
Just wasn't the fun.
All that said, it is kind of fun to watch, a bit of an improvement, or at least something new, and the religious woman isn't happy about being betrayed. Well, it'll have to be somebody, so grow up.
To help put an end to your existences. And to let me watch as each of you perish in this hellhole. You're going to die miserable, excruciating deaths. One by one in front of each other's eyes.
Well, the Stephen King games are in the West, not the coast of Maine. She does inevitably influence the vote, so kind of relevant, leading it to end in a tie. I'll admit the voting is somewhat suspenseful, despite knowing the outcome, and a tie means they will sleep on it and vote again the next day. Meanwhile, Sideplot and friends find the island, but it's a decoy, someone we don't know dies. That's what they do in this episode. In the bathroom, a fight ensues, because the charismatic antagonist is still mad at the crypto guy, and... Really? Is he really dead? I mean, he wasn't an amazing character, but of all the new ones, it was at least kind of fun. Don't know what the benefit of this is. The game's obviously not going to conclude this season. I guess we still have Asian De Niro and the other bad guy who isn't memorable at all. But going into the final episode already, which I guess been one season, I can't say that I give a shit. Aside from the captain guy turning out to be secretly bad, which isn't that surprising. Nothing else happens with that. Big contribution this season. The bathroom fight continues, resulting in 5 deaths, giving the get the fuck out team the edge. But they all have forks, and Gyu-hun realizes the following night they're probably gonna try and kill them. So he decides the best course of action is to hide all the main characters under the beds, where they surely won't be seen, with the justification that even though a lot of others on their side will die, they'll be able to get the guns from the guards, shoot their way to the main office, and you know what? This is ridiculous. I know the second season being as good was a stretch, but how does the same guy who gave us that season give us a finale when we know the fucking outcome? Because in a twist to truly end all twists, it turns out the front man, the guy who runs the damn thing, isn't really a contestant. It was all a big special game, as they call it, because unlike Season 1, it's not just letting contestants kill each other, so I guess they think it's a step up. If anybody told me Season 2 could be written this badly, I probably wouldn't believe them. There's no suspense here whatsoever, and the reason there isn't is fucking obvious. I can't stress that any further, and they even kill off more characters with no development. Like that girl who kinda liked the wimpy guy. The other bad guy kills her very unceremoniously. I guess the point is that the wimpy guy tries to save her from a safe distance. Am I supposed to like him now? They even execute the dad. Again, he hardly ever spoke. He's with them because the last game incidentally put them together. Nobody has any connection. On a side note, you would think the other contestants would be mad. They were essentially sacrificed. And to end it all off, Gyu-hun shamelessly imitates the first season because it was memorable then. So yeah, somehow Squid Game 2 is as lackluster can be. I get that some of the stuff will be resolved in Season 3, but the fact is there's just too many. Aside from the lazy main narrative, nothing else goes anywhere. None of the subplots affect anything. Characters die who added nothing, with no development. And the only other thing the show did that remotely stands out is not only a reused idea, but it's somehow worse. In the first season, the games were only part of what made it good. In this, it's the only remotely enjoyable thing, and even they are kind of mediocre. They're fine, but not that suspenseful, only 2 new ones. Like I said, no emotional deaths, so even that can't save this. I don't think I'd call this unwatchable, but given what this show is, it goes beyond that. Literally everybody knew about Squid Game, even if they didn't realize it. Merchandise, news coverage is kind of like the Korean Walking Dead, only deserving. But similar to how that show declined when AMC fucked with it, Netflix should have just let this be. I know it was supposed to be the creator's decision, but I have a feeling there was some kind of push from them, because how do you go from that season to this mediocrity? You can't tell me otherwise. Nobody legitimately puts thought in and creates something like this. I'm sure some defend it, and if so, I'm glad you're not disappointed, but for most of the audience, Squid Game 2 is kind of just sad. I'm the analyst, and remember kids, some things, you get the idea. So, you've made it to the end. That's an impressive feat indeed. Since you managed that, I guess check out the gaming channel, in which I cover a variety of gaming topics, like analysis videos, such as this one. If you're into that, then press the link in the description. It's that simple.